all pubs and restaurants across central Scotland have been ordered to close from 6 p.m. tomorrow evening in an attempt to reduce the spread of coronavirus.
Pubs and restaurants will be able to open in other parts of Scotland, but they can only serve alcohol outdoors as part of a wider national crackdown on indoor drinking.
To discuss the new restrictions, Scotland's Deputy First Minister, John Swinney, joins us now. Good morning to you, Mr Swinney.
Good morning.
Lots of our viewers in Scotland this morning are getting in touch with us, talking about their frustration, particularly the publicans and the people that run those restaurants who now are facing what they consider to be a decimation of their business and their industry. They don't understand why, considering how strict they have been with their patrons that are coming in, how careful they have been to reduce the infection within their establishments, why they are being made to suffer.
I understand entirely the concerns of the hospitality sector, and we're obviously taking time to discuss the practical implications of the decisions that we had to take yesterday to tackle the spread of coronavirus. We've been told by our scientific advisors that if the virus continues to spread at the rate it's currently spreading at, by the end of October, we'll be back to the levels of infection we had in March. And the government just can't allow that to happen. We've got to take action to stem the spread of the virus. And unfortunately, we've had to take the action that we have announced yesterday.
The hospitality industry would argue that a tiny proportion of spread can be traced back to pubs, indoors, that it's much more likely that you're going to catch it through being in a household, mixing, and that if you tell people they can't be in a pub where they're clearly separated and there are measures in place to prevent the spread, you're actually more likely to see a rise in transmission as people just drink at home.
We published an evidence paper yesterday which went through a lot of the detail which is designed to support the discussion and debate around these issues, because I accept that there's different opinions about what is the best way to tackle the virus. And what that demonstrated was that in contact tracing information, the material that's fed to contact tracers that work out where positive cases may have been picked up, it shows that the two principal areas of difficulty are in households, which is why we've brought in a restriction on people being able to visit other people's houses. We did that 2 weeks ago. And in hospitality. And that's why we've brought in the constraints that we brought in yesterday. Because what we're having to tackle is social interaction, I suppose is the best way to say it. That's how the virus is spreading, and we're having to find ways of trying to get people to have just a bit less contact with others and to observe physical distance.
We can't stop people going home, of course. They have to live at home, they have to go back. But, of course, the frustration from the hospitality sector is that you are decimating their industry when only 20% has been traced back to the hospitality industry, which is relatively few. And if you could keep that open, support the economy, support their jobs, support thousands of people across Scotland, and we understand that Boris Johnson may make similar changes in England as well next week. But if you could support them, then actually you manage that spread, because within their restaurants, within their pubs, within their bars, they are being really strict about that sort of the lack of social distancing, because they know that their business is on the line. Why not police the other areas where people aren't being so strict?
Yeah, I recognise that the hospitality sector has worked very hard to try to ensure that the maximum effect is had on the virus, but we're still seeing the virus rise. And what we've taken is what I think is a proportionate set of decisions. In your introduction, you made it very clear that there is a difference between what's going to happen in the central belt of Scotland, where there is a very intense spread of the virus, and the south of Scotland and the north of Scotland, where there is a lesser but still significant impact of spread of the virus. So we're trying to take measures that are proportionate. And we're also putting in place financial assistance for the hospitality sector to try to help them through this difficult period.
You're going to have an issue, aren't you? Because this is just a 2-week period that this sort of shutdown is happening for. If after 2 weeks it is shown to have worked and infections are coming down, why would you then reopen?
Well, what would be in a position then to see is that essentially the foundations of controlling the virus were more secure in a couple of weeks' time than they are today. And that's why we're taking this intervention at this
But if
stage
you
to try
shut-
and get us
If
into...
what you are doing works, then the argument is you just shut pubs and restaurants until the vaccine's out. I mean, that, you know, that's almost a message that you're sending to the hospitality industry. If we stop people going to pubs and restaurants and it really suppresses the virus, it's a bit like the argument over the lockdown, isn't it? The lockdown suppressed the virus, it worked. The problem is when you don't have a lockdown.
Yeah, what the First Minister set out yesterday was an argument about how we essentially are having to learn to live with the virus, because the virus is not going to disappear overnight. It's going to be there, and we've got to find ways of ensuring that we suppress the virus as effectively as we possibly can do. Now, we have selected some measures over a 2-week period to try to do that, very clearly with the intent that those restrictions will be removed in 2 weeks' time.
At which point the virus will just come back, because you will have proved that that is the way that you suppress the virus, and it will simply spring back and you'll have exactly the same problem. I mean, as the scientists who signed the Barrington Declaration say, you are literally just kicking the can down the road. We have this report from Edinburgh University examining the various scenarios and saying, actually, if you allow the, you know, it's extremely controversial, but if you allow the virus to actually spread and provide some herd immunity and protect those who are vulnerable, that's the way of dealing with the virus. It's very different from what national governments are doing. Have you got any sort of sympathy from those scientists at Edinburgh University in your own nation?
There's obviously different opinions about what's the best approach to take, but in the evidence paper that we provided yesterday, we showed the very significant increases in the spread of the virus amongst the older age group. And by the older age group, I mean people over 40, people who are younger than me. And that's happening at really quite a significant level, in some age groups, doubling within a week. Now, that will significantly increase the vulnerability of the population. It will have much more negative harms on individuals. And the government has decided that we cannot just be passive while that is happening. Okay. We've got to act to stem the virus. Yeah. That's why we've taken the action we've taken.
We haven't got very long with you, unfortunately, but I just want to ask about Margaret Ferrier. You've withdrawn the whip from the SNP, Margaret Ferrier, who travelled around knowing that, firstly, she had coronavirus symptoms and, secondly, after she had a positive test. Why hasn't she resigned as an MP?
That's a decision that only Margaret Ferrier can take. The SNP, as you correctly say, we withdrew the whip immediately. We suspended her party membership because her conduct was completely and utterly indefensible. But we can't require her to stand down as a Member of Parliament. Her local SNP Constituency Association has asked her to do that. The First Minister has asked her to do that, and it's an issue that Margaret Ferrier has to resolve.
OK, we're going to have to leave it there, John Swinney. Thank you very much for joining us this morning.